Good afternoon. Welcome to this John Logie Baird Lecture, the second of 3 sessions that are here at IBC this year. This particular session is going to be focused on the video technology area, particularly looking at where we've been most recently, where we're going to within the next 5 years. So hopefully it's going to be a really interesting 45 minutes or so for all of us here. We've got some great presenters who are coming along today to talk about their perspectives on the state of the video technology world. We have Maria Ingold from Cinemedia, we have Xavier Leclerc from Broadpeak, and of course we have Ralph Neudel from DTG here today to actually present to you their views. And I'm not going to really mess around too much other than say that, we've had a lot of technology developed over the last 54 years that IBC's been in existence. The last 20 have been incredible. The last 5 have been super incredible. There have been hits, there have been misses, there have been mares of technology developed over the years. We don't talk about 3D much anymore. But, the next 5 years are going to be really key in the industry. And I want to just hand over straight away to Maria, who will present right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Right, it's so nice to see everybody in 3D and not square. So welcome back to IBC. And I'm going to be talking on the state of video technology in the next 5 years. So in 2010, I spoke here. I did a paper on how to build a video on demand service. And 2010 is also the year that I was the first to launch 3D in the UK for Virgin. Right, okay. This was the market in 2014. So we started moving forwards, and by 2022, there are a lot more players in the market. It's a mature market, and with maturity means competition, and customers have more choice. You start reaching sort of a threshold of what people are willing to watch, and we start looking at new ways of monetizing content. So we've tried all sorts of innovation. We've done everything from HD to 4K to 8K to 3D, to looking at virtual reality, to looking at computer games, to looking at the metaverse, and then there were a few things like ultraviolet. We won't mention that too loudly. So we made a few mistakes, but we're progressing, and we're thinking about new ways to monetize content. So right now we're looking at a lot of different revenue models. But we're also starting to see that revenue growth is slowing, and that subscribers are churning. And then, virus hits and a recession hits. To be fair, back in 2007, with the last recession, we had iPlayer, I was launching video on demand film service for Virgin. YouTube was out, the iPhone was launching. Broadband was less than 4 megabits a second. There were a few things. So innovation now is changing. We're looking at how do we look at cost cutting and generating new revenue. So Netflix, for example, is doing a few different things, and that's what I'm going to focus on, is sort of talk through those kinds of things. So we're going to look at the changing in revenue models with advertising. We're going to look at password sharing and what's being done about that, and around sustainability. So in shifting monetization, back in the day we had linear, and then we got video on demand, and then we've moved from all of these platforms to augment that with OTT, or even in some cases replace it with OTT. We've also started doing things with cloud, and using multi-tenant SaaS in order to be more agile, to save costs, and to reduce time to get things to market. We're also changing all the pay models. So during COVID, much to the consternation of cinema, we launched PVOD, and we're starting to change the way that we're monetizing by creating hybrid models with SVOD and AVOD. Now, there are some things with subscription. So pay TV, for instance, is staying flat. It's growing in some regions. It's declining in others. But it's online video that's really winning subscription. But if you want to look at where we're monetizing, then that's ad-supported. And since the beginning, it has always been higher than SVOD. But we are starting to hit thresholds around subscriptions. So that's kind of maxing out at around 2. So if we really want to start monetizing, we need to look at creating hybrid so that we can take advantage of more of the customer's budget of time and money. And advertisers are interested in this because it allows them to efficiently and effectively start targeting audiences, which is why Netflix and Disney are so interested in this and trying to charge so much. In the next area we're going to look at is the shift from what we used to call brand building to recovering some of the revenue that is being lost around password sharing. So about 29% of all direct-to-consumer services are shared out of the household. And out of that as well, we've got about a third of the 18 to 34-year-olds that are having their service completely paid for by someone else. And Netflix is looking at this and saying, okay, there's 100 million people that I could have generating revenue for me. So they are looking at how do we monetize this? So they've got a couple of different trials going on, and there are different other places trying different ways of doing it, but it's hard to do. And the reason it's hard to do is because there's casual sharing, but there's also fraud. And then if you just use a threshold-based approach to try to solve that, it's not particularly effective. So you have to start using behavior analysis and doing that over time in order to determine which households are doing this. But that's not the only thing that's happening. There's also in piracy, we're seeing a lot of scripts being used by pirates now. And then they're not even having to spend all of the money anymore. They're just stealing content directly from CDNs. And so the service operator is the one who's actually fronting the cost for the pirates, and the pirates are making all of the money. So looking at sustainability. Now, sustainability, obviously, it's going to be good for the environment, and we should go there. But it's also going to be good for saving costs. So when Netflix, last year, they've been measuring for a few years, Netflix last year had 1.53 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And that's a lot of gasoline for a lot of cars per year, a lot of powering households, and a lot of charging mobile phones. The bottom line is that when you stop spending so much on energy, you start also reducing the costs that you're spending. So how do we reduce those costs? How are we more sustainable? Well, there's a few different ways we can do this. One is looking at codecs. Now, the thing about codecs is you've got to look at how much you're actually spending to do that compression and decompression, and then whether or not these are royalty-free, and whether or not they're available on different devices. So we are not quite there yet. Over time, what we're seeing is a shift from hardware codecs to software codecs. We're also seeing sort of VVC, AV1 starting to gain a bit more traction over time. But it's going slowly. So what else is happening? Well, we're starting to see that we've got visual quality perception. You can reduce the bit rate without reducing that visual quality. And there are a number of improvements that are happening in that specific technology that are helping to advance that. Cinemedia, who I work for, also acquired Codecs. Now, Codecs does just-in-time encoding. And just-in-time encoding can really help out with creating cost-effective, fast delivery, as well as disaster recovery. And what it does is you're encoding just the segment that is being watched. And if you start using spot instances, then you can really save money with that and save resources as well. The other thing that's happening is we're starting to see what's kind of called CDN on tap or just-in-time edge serving. And that's allowing people to further reduce costs. So if you want to find out more, I'm with Cinemedia. We do all of this and more. Please come see us in Hall 5. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here today. It's a real pleasure to be in front of real people, right? Not behind screens and cameras. My name is Xavier. I run business development for Broadpeak. Broadpeak is a company that basically sells software to help build infrastructure inside the telco networks. Okay, so we have a set of products around video delivery. I won't talk too much about this today, obviously. I will talk about the trends in the market, how we see basically the OTT scaling, what are the technologies available to them, and where are the challenges going forward. So let's start with local news, right? Formula One in the Netherlands. Formula One has moved from broadcast network into IP streaming this year. We saw the NENT group basically acquiring the rights for Formula One here in the Netherlands. Since then, they changed the name to Viaplay. That was earlier in the year. And this change, basically moving a popular event like Formula One onto streaming, is already creating bumps, is already creating problems inside the ISP networks, right? This is a graph we got from one of our partners here. And this is the delta across two different weeks, one with Formula One and one without it, right? So you can see already the pressure being put onto the ISP networks. This makes sense, right? Because it used to be over a broadcast network, over cable or over terrestrial. And we moved this to IP, to ABR delivery, onto the telecom network, so therefore it's slowing the networks, okay? It's getting to the point where quality problems are being seen. We have seen the regulator here, so my Dutch is not very good, but you can see a consumentenbond, right? And compenseren, that's a sign already of slight challenges. And Viaplay basically has to explain why the challenges are onto the ISP networks, okay? So this is the state of where we are. I think there's a race later today, so hopefully everything will be fine. But moving IP, popular linear content onto IP is a challenge, right? That's where we are today. You can ask if we are ready for prime time with OTT, right? This is a set of numbers from last year when Max Verstappen won the championship. There was about 5 million streams being delivered at the time, so there was 5 million people watching broadcast, I should say, at the time. If we are to move this to IP in HD, we're looking at about 30 terabits per second of capacity across the Dutch networks. Okay, so this is challenging at the scale of the Netherlands. If we are to do it in 4K, right, Formula One is better in 4K, obviously, we get to 120 terabits per second, right? This is not a volume of content that the ISPs can carry today across the network, right? So there is definitely a challenge here. I would say the issue today is not as bad as it could be, right? Because Formula One is still available on linear broadcast channels, right? So it's not as bad as it could be. But going forward, once Viaplay moves everything onto ABR, there will be a load and there will be challenges going forward, okay? So this is where we are, right? This is the state of the market, clear event, something happening today here in the Netherlands. So what are the challenges, right? We're looking at a number of issues. Obviously, the quality, that's the number one issue customers are going to complain about. They're watching their favorite content onto an expensive 4K TV, and the TV starts to buffer, or they can't get 4K, or they have a lot of latency, right? So quality of OTT is an issue when you deliver onto the big screens. And also the control of the traffic for the ISPs, right? As the name indicates, OTT is over the top, so it's traffic that is not typically managed by the ISP, so that can overwhelm the ISPs. The networks might be clogged up, and you run into, again, quality problems, okay? So what are we seeing in the market? We're seeing this trend of distributing content not in a OTT fashion, not in over-the-top fashion, but more in partnership, right? And this is something very interesting. Basically, we started to see the OTT providers working with the telcos, working with the networks to make sure that their video delivery will be of good quality, okay? I put here a picture of Disney Plus launching in Turkey. I think that was earlier in the year. They launched across, I think it was about 10 countries quite recently, and everywhere Disney Plus is launching their OTT service, they create additional load in the networks, and they try to establish those partnerships to make sure that their content will be delivered with good quality. Okay, so this is happening across the world, obviously, with the large OTT players being involved. Benefits, obviously, is all about distributing local content. This is one of the projects we did a few years ago with HBO. Very simple, similar to the Netflix model, right? Pushing caches inside an ISP network to make sure that there is capacity in that network to deliver the service. Nothing new here. Netflix has been doing it for 10 years with their Open Connect appliances. You go and deploy additional servers. You go and extend basically your CDN into the ISP networks. So this works. We prove that it improves the quality of experience. It reduces the load on several parts of the network, but we don't think this is the way forward, right? We think this has solved some of the challenges for the VOD OTT wave, what we've seen with Netflix, what we're seeing with Disney, with HBO as well, but we don't think this is the solution for the future. The trend here is about content providers getting more control over their video delivery. Options today are to use the global CDNs, right? So I'll put a couple of logos here, CloudFront, Akamai, Edgio, I should have changed the Limelight name here, Lumen, so work through a third party to deliver the content onto the ISP networks, or work directly with the ISP to get better control, right? This is not new. Again, you may have seen this with the Streaming Video Alliance, right? SVTA now, and their open caching specification with the idea to basically open the CDN inside the ISP networks to the content providers. This is the initiative that Disney has been driving for many years and something that is today in production at scale. Disney is already basically leveraging capacity inside the ISP network to deliver their video on demand services. Okay, so here I bring the content closer to the end user, better access, fewer chances of things going wrong. Basically end up with a better quality of experience. So we avoid rebuffering, we reduce startup time, and we improve the quality on the screen. Okay, so how does it look? Put a big picture here, a slightly complex network. The idea is very simple. Today, the OTTs are on the left of the picture here. So you see them, the Disney, HBO, DAZN, TikTok of this world, Prime Video as well. The idea is to bring their content closer to the end users, right? End users are here, connected through a series of stages across the network. You have your access network, your aggregation, metro, backbone, peering transit, and every step of the way there are chances of something going wrong, right? So the further you push the content into the network, the more likely you will have a good experience, the more deterministic becomes your video delivery, okay? There are considerations around latency, reliability of the network, but the bottom line is very simple. If you want to deliver high quality video, you have to push your content closer to the edge, especially for live, right? Because for live video, there's nowhere to hide. You don't have a buffer in your client. You want to deliver content with low latency. So if anything happens during the delivery, you will impact the quality of experience, okay? So this is where we're heading, basically pushing content further into the telco networks. Am I stuck, maybe? Or? There we go. Tailwinds, maybe just 2 words about open caching. I mentioned it already. It's about making it easy for content providers to access resources inside the telco networks. Because again, this idea is not new. This is something we tried about 10 years ago with the Open Content Alliance, I think it was called, or CX, Open Content Exchange it was. We tried to basically federate a number of CDNs in Europe. I think it was BT, Orange, Telefonica getting involved. Telecom Italia was part of the project, trying to create an alternative to the global CDN. That didn't work. That was too complex at the time. Here, we're solving the issue of complexity with a set of single APIs, so all the CDN behave in the same way, and they expose back to the content providers like Disney so that it's easy for them to go and provision dynamically their services across those CDN, right? So tailwinds here pushing us in this direction is open caching and the Streaming Video Alliance. We've been very active in this forum, and I think there's a lot more to do. Today, open caching is mostly about unicast distribution, and we think we should open caching. That's hard to say, right? We should open caching to do also multicast distribution, right? Now you may think of multicast as the legacy transport for IPTV that we've done back in the days, but multicast can also be used now to deliver ABR content, and we'll get to that in a minute. Just to show where we think we are in terms of video delivery. So Maria talked about the iPhone launch and a number of events that happened. It used to be that streaming and ABR was a little bit of a gadget in a way, right? It was for the second screen, it was for your phone, maybe your iPad at the time. And now what we're seeing is ABR taking the center stage, right? You deliver streaming to a variety of devices, and a lot of the content is now being offered with OTT and ABR, right? The launch of Disney+, Prime Video, entering the market in Europe, DAZN also launching in about 200 countries at the time, very active in a handful here of countries in Europe. And there's been a number of facilitators along the way to basically move all the video to ABR, right? Because what we're seeing here is basically that all the video will become ABR. We will live in a world where we retire all the legacy TS, transport stream video. Everything will be streaming in the years ahead. And that means a massive amount of volume here, especially for the video-on-demand services, but also pipes that are going to have to get much larger, right? Because we're moving live content, and live content drives the size of the networks. You have a large number of people basically joining at the same time, wanting to watch the stream. And that means that the networks will have to deliver more content, but also more content at the same time. The concurrency increases. And the issue with the telco networks is they were never designed to deliver video. In the past, we used to have broadcast technology. We used to do IPTV and multicast. But today, the data networks were not designed to do that. So this is going to be a challenge, massive amount of video, and a lot of people trying to watch this content at the same time. And we're here, right? We're here in this broadcaster and live OTT wave where we start to see more OTT everywhere. Maybe I'll mention what the DVB is doing as well with DVB native IP, right? How can we deliver ABR video over the traditional broadcast networks, right? Whether they are satellite or terrestrial, we now have ways to deliver streaming over those networks as well. So in the end, everything will be ABR. How you transport it is the challenge. So unicast itself, we know, doesn't scale very well. And I'll probably have a little slide on that, right? This is, the Akamai traffic over the last couple of years. You see a lot more unicast being delivered, but it doesn't fit with the network, right? We know we hit bottlenecks. We know we run into problems, right? So the solution is to leverage what is inside the telco networks, is to leverage the multicast capabilities, to leverage the distribution networks, the CDNs that are built inside the telco networks. And this is where we're heading. I'll leave you maybe with this example. This is Telecom Italia in Italy, basically building a multicast ABR distribution using our technology. They build it for their own video services. They run about 3 million of TeamVision subscribers, so onto an Android set-top box. They use this technology to basically deliver streaming services at scale. So they've done the last Winter Olympics, the last Summer Olympics. They've done the French the Tennis Open, all in 4K over streaming and with low latency. And this is the challenge. This is how they can deliver high quality and high scale content to their devices. An interesting thing with this is an asset on their network that they have opened to the OTTs as well. And this is where, I'm trying to click, here we go. This is where they've opened it to DAZN. DAZN owns the Serie A rights, so the top football in Italy, the Premier League in Italy, if you like. And DAZN basically today is using this infrastructure to deliver their OTT streaming services, so streamed into a DAZN app using the Telecom Italia network. And that, I think, is very much where we're heading, where we're going to start to see more and more OTT providers basically leveraging assets, network assets built inside the operator's network. At the end, the network operators know the network. They know how to deliver content. And if you combine the best content delivery, the best knowledge of the network with the best content, you end up with the best experience. So that's where I think we're heading. Okay. Thank you. The timer didn't work.
Thank you, Xavier, for this. Hello and a warm welcome, and thanks for being here. It's great presenting in this session. I'm Ralf Neudel with the DTG, and let's see if my presentation comes up. Yes, thank you. So I'm here with the DTG, the Digital TV Group UK, a membership organization in the UK with over 100 members in the television industry, the television sector. And we're talking about video technology, and we want to look at the main application of video technology, I'd say, television and whatever we see under the term of television with blurring borders, of course. And we want to see how is access to television in the future when things are changing, things are especially moving to IP. So that's a quick glimpse I want to give in our work here. So obviously we've seen that. The shift towards IP drives innovation and investment at the moment. So that is where the big change is. We see all the fast channels coming up, AVOD service coming up. We have an ever-growing number of services, and this keeps rising on the free and paid-for domain. Of course, this also means a lot of competition, and even though people are consuming more video than ever today, our time is still limited at some point in time, so the market is also confined. And what we see, of course, is the user behavior not only changing, it's actually diversifying much more. We look at a switch from analog to digital. That's often taken as a comparison. We all know that that doesn't help. That was just the transmission. Of course, we all use television services or video services in very different ways, and people in different demographics start using it a different way. They have different priorities, and it's very difficult to serve that diversity, actually. So that's why we said we need to do some research, actually, how this happens. So this is an annual work the DTG is doing in the UK, but this is applicable to other markets as well. This is the state of the nation. That's the full report is always available to the members. And we asked people what's their main way to watch television. So what do you do? What do they mean also by this term? So for 30%, that's live free TV channels that are being broadcast to their TV. But you see this is followed up quite quickly by SVOD services with 28%. So we already see the split behavior. And of course, it is not either or, it's both. People are doing all these things, or most of these things, or many of these things. And that is quite complex, of course, to support. The other one we asked people is, where do you watch television? Is it a TV set or not? And not so surprisingly, a large majority of 79% said, actually, yes, we use the main device to watch long-form content is a TV screen. What I found quite surprising was actually that even for the younger generation of the 16 to 24-year-olds, 2/3 still watch long-form content, mainly on the big screen. So that is, I think, insight that is important to take into account. So we talked about this, and Xavier and Maria already mentioned a lot of the challenges we're facing. So we know we're moving more towards IP. So what are these challenges? And these challenges, I think, that is important that the industry comes together and collaborates on this, and it just lets it roll out, because we end up in situations where the networks just collapse or don't carry it anymore. But there is many more questions. So how do we deal with this growing fragmentation? Even solutions where a certain ISP works with a certain content provider, this is a kind of a matrix. So how do you support this? How do you support this multitude? There's many different devices. So if there's ABR, MABR, multicast ABR on a set-top box, it doesn't mean it works on another device. So how do we support other devices in that? This complexity keeps growing as our cost, while at the same time, with more competitors, of course, the margin is getting lower. The obvious one, is our IP infrastructure ready for the shift? So can we just turn off broadcast television? I don't think we can today. I think we've seen examples that this is not possible. And of course, in the end, of course, the investment could be done, but who's doing the investment to do that, to support this? And is this efficient? Is it an efficient way to do it? What's the energy efficiency of streaming everything over IP, especially live events? unicast is just not efficient. So how do we deal with that? That's a key factor we need to look at. The one I mentioned before, the user behavior is changing and will keep changing and diversifying. So it's more difficult to support more cases on more devices in more environments, different forms of content. And what we believe as a DTG is important in all that, in all innovation, in all great services, it's important that everyone can easily access these services. And that's not just a matter of usability, it's also a matter of what network is available where. And we've seen this in the UK just recently with the Bilsdale transmitter fire. There was a large DTT transmitter burning down, and overnight 1 million people lost actually access to radio and TV services. And there was no way just to move them to IP quickly for many reasons, because the network wasn't there. People didn't know how to get to radio or TV service over IP. So we need to be prepared for this shift, and we shouldn't just walk into it and then realize that we're losing a lot of people along the way. And we think it's important to work together on this because in this complex ecosystem, it's quite difficult to say who defines what, who's defining what technology, what's the right technology to pick, where are we moving, especially in a world where also a lot of more traditional media companies are moving into a sector with new players, not so new players, but players in the market who have always been online. So how is this mix working? I think it makes sense to actually come together as an industry and to openly discuss these topics and to work together in that. And that's what's happening here. And that's what caused DTG to start an initiative in the UK to answer this question. How to deliver a future TV experience in the wider sense that is stable, reliable, resilient, sustainable, accessible to all, and also trusted, because that's a different thing than it was before when a television was just connected and to a broadcast antenna. Now, this is, of course, a different environment with all devices being online. So that's the research we're starting under the name of Pathway to the Future of UK Television. A lot of that is applicable to other markets as well. And we're performing an industry survey on that right now and a research following this. And the main thing we're asking people in the industry is, what are the major blockers for actually moving to IP seamlessly? What's essential to address? What are the technologies? What are the gaps we still need to fill? Where is the industry actually willing to collaborate on? Where it's maybe also more a commercial distinction. That's a different thing. So not everything will be solved by just coming together. And of course, talking also about the changing business perspectives and new revenue models. So this is work we're currently performing, and a very, very first glimpse at the initial results from individual interviews we have. Those are the top 10 topics we could identify where people in the industry, stakeholders, we said, we need to work on this, and we're willing to work on this together. And very related to what I said before, the service resilience and reliability is a topic. How do we achieve this in an IP-based television or IP-centric or IP-first television-centric universe? How do we make it easy for people to actually find their services, get a device, and you get the service you're expected to receive, you get access to, that this is easy. Accessibility across all different platforms and devices, not achieved at all today. That is a main one. This experience that it's also so simple and easy just to switch a channel. It should also be that easy to switch to a different service or VOD service. That doesn't necessarily mean changing to different HDMI inputs. Related to that, this signing in many times on many different platforms, many different applications, can't this be made easier for the user, more seamless? Respecting societal values, there is a number one. Of course, the sustainability question, I guess, is a key one here. Protecting younger viewers, what has been achieved before, just with a timeline and a time gap, the watershed in the UK. How do we do this in the future? Cybersecurity, data privacy, big topics, of course, in an IP-based environment. And then also that we come and work on really working on interoperability, that these things just work out of the box. And we think it helps to define, and the industry agrees, to define test requirements and provide resources for that. And that is what I want to leave you with. And I hope that we get a really good discussion about these topics. What do you see as the main blockers for moving into a future, more IP-based television world? What are the main challenges? So thank you for your time, and we'll continue with the panel. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for those presentations. I'll just a quick capture of some of the key statements made during those sessions and sort of like list them really quickly now so we can sort of prime everyone's questions. I heard there that new revenue models focus on sustainability. I saw lower costs, better compression, higher quality, lower costs again, cooperation between new partners, collaboration between different infrastructure companies, open source, cloud, SaaS technologies. I heard evolving and moving services to IP very, very clearly throughout all of that. And driven by consumer and commercial behavior. So not just that actually that consumers are consuming more SVOD content, it's the fact that commercially we're putting more SVOD content out there, more on-demand content, more IP-based content. And of course, that last point there really made correctly by DTG about ensuring that reputation and trust is kept within this move away from the old world to the new. So that's what I caught there. Hopefully you can take that board. We'll have some questions come through from Slido for those people who know how to use Slido. And if that doesn't quite work, we'll maybe take some from a microphone. But I've got some questions already written down here. And I suppose the key thing here is the things that stick in our minds right now is energy costs going up, environmental impact, sustainability is a key piece, costs are a key piece. I've heard it around the show itself. These phrases keep coming up right now. And what's interesting for me from this presentations about nominally video technology, we haven't focused so much on the technology as making that technology we have already better. So what's your perspective on that, Maria, after that?
Yeah, it definitely seems more like we're hitting the evolution versus revolution piece. We're really focusing on that cost cutting and revenue generation. Now that said, the last time things like this happened, we had a whole bunch of new things, surprise ourselves. But that might come from something very different. It might come from that TikTok generation or something like that. But right now, we're really focusing on doing things better so that we can be more efficient, so that we can cut costs, so that we can recoup things that pirates are hacking and with the sharing and all of that. So people are really looking at different approaches.
Okay, Xavier?
It's interesting, right? I mean, a few years ago, no one was talking about green and streaming, and we now realize that streaming is not very green, right? And if we can't, control, the direction streaming is going, we're going to destroy the planet, right? So this is where some of the activities that have been launched, we're thinking of the greening of streaming, for example. I think the first achievement of the greening of streaming is the awareness, right? At the end, we want to come out with, we were one of the founding members. We want to come out with best practices and, doing the right thing together. But the first, I think, achievement is making people aware, right? Making green a topic today. Having Ralph tapping me on the shoulder, say, at the end, can we have a chat about green, right? Because this is now a real topic. And I think this is where we're heading. We now realize that we have a problem and we can then fix it.
Okay, Ralph?
Yeah. And I think that absolutely want to follow up to this. And I think the next step is going to be actually transparency, creating data, gathering data, because we talk about this, we want to reduce the energy consumption, but we need to do this on the basis of facts. There have been some early research on how bad streaming is. I think some of that was a bit overdone. But we need to look at the facts and the numbers, and that's a process we need to start now. And we'll end up looking at things maybe a different way also. Do we need 8K content on a small screen? Probably not. Is a video codec only being judged by quality of a bit rate, or isn't it also the overall energy consumption it takes to decode the content 100 million times? Aren't we just outsourcing kind of the energy consumption to the consumer in that point? And being honest about this and creating transparency about this is crucial.
And picking up on what Xavier said, the partnerships in terms of that move to IP, the collaboration, we're all aware from the broadcast world, we have existing partnerships between broadcasters, operators, basically uplink operators. There's a whole ecosystem there. There's very much a whole different ecosystem for IP-based delivery. Those different new partnerships. How do you feel about that? Have you seen your experience of that? And that actually ties into a question we've got here from Anonymous, who lovely contributes all the time, about, and also asking the question, why should content providers partner with telcos over third-party CDNs like Akamai, as an example? Other CDNs are available.
Yeah. It comes down to doing the right thing. I think, at the end, when, DAZN launched in Italy at the beginning, it was a disaster, right? It was really bad press. There was a lot of problems, and, the consumer at the end suffers, and the customer is going to blame either the content provider, which what happened in Italy because it was across a network, or is going to blame the service provider, the network provider. And this is where we get into this idea of maybe I need to churn, I need to get to another network to access the content. So it's detrimental to both, right? They have to work together to ensure that at the end there is the quality, there is the right experience, right? If they don't do it, then there's a chance that the quality won't be there and the customer will start pointing fingers. So it's in their mutual interest, and that's where we're starting to see, right? I think Disney driving open caching has been a big talk, right? We talked about open caching, streaming video alliance for a while, and now what we're starting to see, it's also the local broadcasters here in Europe, national broadcasters, tapping us and saying, oh, could we do some open caching on our scale on one country? Because at the end of the day, if you bring the broadcasters' content into the top, 2-3 networks in most of the countries, you already cover about probably 80% of the population. So you can do things like open caching collaboration on a much smaller scale. It doesn't have to be Disney and 200, countries and thousands of operators. No, you can do it with one local broadcaster with 2 or 3 networks, and you still, improve the experience, you reduce the cost, you reduce your carbon footprint. That is where I think we're heading in terms of partnership.
Okay. And Ralph, are there lessons to be learned from the first digital platforms when people came together and collaborated for the first time? Everyone, some of us may remember the various challenges of the move to digital in the UK, where we launched on digital platform in the UK, DTT, and it collapsed after a number of years quite badly, actually, and Freeview grew out of the fires of that. Are there lessons to be learned there for the move to IP? About how you build an ecosystem that works?
That is a challenging question. Also, I have to admit, it's a bit before I was around in the UK market. I think in general, respecting commercial interests is important, but still talking openly about these challenges. And that's the point. It doesn't help if, as a content provider, I just ignore the fact that ISPs suffer under that traffic and then can't deliver the quality they need to run their services. And the other way around, of course, it's obvious for ISPs that they need to support the use cases that actually drive broadband. So I think that's I'd say the main approach. Get people to the table who are involved and see that we talk about it.
And I think that's probably a little bit of a set of discussions or battles over the next few years about broadband operators getting more of a piece of the pie of costs. I'm sure, I think, Xavier, you've seen that in your engagement.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting set of trends as well. When you look at the large telcos, I think there was a report that came out probably 4 or 5 months ago. It was written by Telefonica, Vodafone, maybe BT as well. They were looking at the cost of OTT on the networks. So it's going to be a little bit biased. It's written by the telcos, so the cost is questionable. But the figures that were coming out was 30 euros per subscriber per year in terms of infrastructure for fixed line. For mobile, it was 50 euros per subscriber per year. So they now start to put a figure on how much the load of OTT is costing them in terms of money. Doing it with energy, I think, is something that's going to come next, right? And saying, look, I'm actually footing your bill here when you deploy, hundreds of servers into my network. I'm powering those networks, and I think this is going to basically create a momentum, right? We're going to start seeing more awareness again in this field, and we're going to start to see basically the telcos maybe not getting monetary value out of it, but through the partnership getting a value of exchange, right? Maybe better rights, maybe better conditions. My network is enabled. I can do 4K. I can deliver your content in 4K type of thing. So advantages, and the value might not be monetary at the end. You see what I mean? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. One thing, of course, also IP delivery brings is another little thing that satellite has always been multi-country, but the rights have been generally very regionalized and very country-oriented. But with IP, there's no boundaries, so that comes in for some, maybe for Maria, if I can ask you, piracy, content rights. Netflix is already a single world operator.
Yeah, they'll steal it from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So, and this, it's very close to my heart because I also judge films for BAFTA. So when you're trying to create content, you need money to reinvest into creating great content. And pirates are just, everybody else, content operator, creators, operators is fronting the bill, and they're just making money off of it. And it's so much simpler for them to do it, and they're getting so much more savvy. And it looks really good. And a lot of people don't even know that they're using a pirate site. Yeah. So there's a lot to sort of think through here about how we fight that.
Okay. And I'm going to come and ask a couple of questions now, actually. I'm going to ask them actually in an order, maybe a strange order, but I think I want to end with a positive note. So the first question I'm going to ask here, all of you, looking forward to the next 5 years, what technology is going to die in video? Personal choices or otherwise, What is the 3D of this next 5 years? Maria?
I don't know. I mean, I'm already feeling it with 3D. I'm kind of afraid to launch something else and then find out that's the thing that's gone. But I'm curious. Everybody's talking about the metaverse, but we've been talking about caves and stuff since the 90s and everything. And I'm really curious to see how well that goes. I think it's if we're brands looking at it and thinking, hey, we're just gonna do this, then it's not gonna work. And I talked to a 17-year-old recently and said, what do you think about the metaverse? And they said, what's a metaverse? So, we're going to have to see where that goes. I think it needs to be something that's pick up, pick down, easier, glasses or contact lenses. Maybe when we get there, maybe that'll take off.
Okay. Xavier?
Yeah, to Maria's point, I think we don't yet know how the experiences are going to be. We, try to prototype various, forms of content. The multi-angles, multi-views, the volumetric video, holographic video. All of that is sort of still out there. I think we're gonna have to take practical steps along the way to get there. Right? It's not about the metaverse yet. Maybe it's more about the what we did here last time, the multiverse, this idea of being able to switch from what we do today in a 2D world into a 3D world. Take a traditional video you're watching and put it into a headset and have a simple sort of VR experience that works with low latency and all that, and that people start to consume. Because today everything is so far away that I think people have trouble relating with that technology so far that we're going to need to take smaller steps along the way, I think.
Okay, and Ralph?
I don't want to kill the metaverse yet.
That's okay.
For me, but I agree, of course, there's a certain hype, and also we use this term and nobody knows what we're actually talking about. It makes it difficult. But if you look at how we produce content nowadays, using a lot of gaming engines and using a lot of virtual environments, it feels not supernatural to stop and just glue it in just a flat thing that you can't take apart anymore afterwards. So I think that this kind of more object approach is something that's going to get closer to the end user. If it is going to be a real metaverse or 3D environment is a different question. I don't want to kill any technology anyway, because I would get killed by someone if I get out in the moment I get off stage. But I said, my earlier point is just raising resolution, this 8K thing. I think there's a limited use for that in every day, and especially with energy consumption more taken into account and cost more taken into account, I think that we'll have a hard time for mass application.
Well, let's go on the positive side then. What do you think is going to be the key development, key innovation, the key technology that's going to drive us in the next 5 years?
I think when I talk about television, I realize already that the borders are very blurry between what we perceive as linear television and what is VOD content. I see there's a whole world between that of an experience that is more leaned back, still personalized. I think we will see services that are somewhere in between that. You could say that broadcast TV is just a playlist. I don't think it is that, but curating playlists and kind of adapting to your personal interests, I see a lot of potential in that domain.
Xavier, quickly, as we're coming to the end.
Yeah, I think to Ralph's point, we talked a lot about personalization over the last few years. We talk a lot about fast here at this IBC. That seems to be the buzzword. But that's where we're heading, right? If you look at it, once you move all the content to streaming, to ABR, that's the biggest advantage. The multi-screen, obviously, but the advertising, being able to do easily this targeted advertising function. Before with, the legacy technology, it's a lot more complex. It's been done, but it's more costly as well. Here, it's going to become naturally a feature of ABR. Advertising will be here and continue to grow a lot.
Okay. Maria?
I think it depends on which sort of age group demographic you fit in. Because, there's people who are still really happy watching linear. And then I'm the OTT generation, and the kids that are following are the TikTok generation. So I think sort of the next things are going to be something that we don't really expect, but it's something that we can, that don't really necessarily speak to us, but speak to that generation, and that you can pick up, that you can put down, that you can share, and it's a world where they can't really differentiate if it's good between advertising and between content.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was really good, because at least nobody killed broadcast. So I'd like to bring the session to an end. I'd like to thank the panelists and the presenters. Thank you very much indeed, and I hope you have a great rest of IBC.